Welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stober. Now, we're not letting up in addressing the numerous challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic as it continues to ravage the world. Now, today's program is the second of a critical look at matters arising from the second wave of the pandemic in Nigeria. My guest is a foremost virologist, a former president of the Nigerian Academy of Science, a former university administrator, a WHO consultant. He is a 2002 laureate of the Nigerian National Order of Merit, the country's highest award for academic excellence. Let's welcome Professor Oyewale Tomori as he joins me via Zoom from Ibadan. Prof, it's good to see you.
Cyril.
All right. Okay, we'll just go straight into the issues, matters arising from the coronavirus pandemic. Now it's clear to everyone, well, almost everyone, that Nigeria is indeed in the second wave of the pandemic. But let's look at COVID-19, the coronavirus itself, as it continues to ravage the world. We have heard of variants from the UK, South Africa, and of course, we do know now that the UK variant is in Nigeria. Now, they say this is the nature of viruses. How so?
By nature, as you said, viruses naturally, it's a game plan. They mutate and they change depending on what environment they come into. And as they move from one person to another, because of the disease, the defense mechanism of the body, they also adapt and change. And in the process, that's one of the methods of survival. Because if your body's immunity manages to crush them, then they cannot be transmitted to other person. So in the process, they adapt also against that immunity that the body has and bring in new variants. One of the viruses that is very good at that is the one they call the flu virus. It keeps changing regularly. And in fact, for that one, you have to keep changing the kind of vaccine you use almost like every 2 years or thereabouts. So it's a natural phenomenon of viruses to mutate and to change.
Right, now this does provide some extraordinary circumstances here because the race is on the world over to find a cure. A vaccine has come out, and even as the world has witnessed millions being vaccinated, there are still all kinds of controversies about the safety or the efficacy of these vaccines. Now, if, as you say, this virus, like viruses, mutates all the time, how sure is it that the vaccine that's been put together now would really address this virus, because it keeps mutating?
Yeah, thank you very much, Cyril. I did say they mutate. A lot of times, the mutation brings nothing else. Sometimes it even leads to the death of the virus, if you can say that viruses die. Sometimes they mutate and then get out of existence. But occasionally, you find the mutation causing problem like it is right now, like the variant from Britain. It changes their property, and the property could be like ability to infect, to transmit more rapidly. However, the experience of the past with many of the viruses that we've had in the past, like measles, like yellow fever, like polio, even though they mutate, the vaccine that is produced against them have stood the test of time. So the likelihood is that this one will have the same situation. Although I hear that so far the tests of some of the vaccines have worked like the one in the South African one that you're mentioning, one of the vaccines produced by the Novax worked very well with the mutant from Britain or the variant from Britain, but not as well with the variant from South Africa. So these are expected things. And because people have that information, action is being taken to ensure that even for that one in South Africa, a new vaccines can be developed as quickly as possible. Time has changed when you have to wait for 10 years before a vaccine is developed. Things are moving very rapidly now. And so even as the the variants are discovered, action is taken to see if we can produce the vaccine almost immediately against them.
Does it make it more challenging? Because now we're talking about vaccines and not cure. The world is still searching for a cure. Would it make it more challenging when a cure is eventually found and variants keep popping up? Would one cure, maybe if it's developed, now address a wide spectrum of those viruses?
I think you're right, Cyril. These are the challenges we face in the modern era. And again, the modern science and modern times are capable of quickly meeting up with that. If it was in the days when you have to spend 10 years to develop a vaccine, even before you develop it, it has become useless. But this time, almost as rapidly as the variants are coming out, efforts are being made to ensure that new strains or new vaccines are made to counter them. So it's a challenging time, but the times are also ready for the challenges.
Now, we've had people say that the second wave usually, the second wave of a pandemic usually is deadlier than the first. And it would seem as if with COVID-19, there's some truth in that. Is there any particular reason why a pandemic would come, ravage a society, and a second wave, because they say almost all the time a second wave does happen, is there any particular reason why a second wave is deadlier than the first wave, if it can be proven?
Yeah, generally, I think just as we're saying, one of the reasons why we have a second wave is that supposing there's a variant that comes and has increased what you call it, transmissibility, then of course that means it transmits faster and many more people get infected. And the fact that more people get infected means many more people will be sick. And because they'll be sick, then of course some of them will die. And therefore, if there had been a group that was not infected before, either for one reason or the other, you now have a variant, which is now more easily transmitted. Like I think they said for the British one, they're getting something like about close to 60, 70% transmissibility. Therefore, the fact that it's more transmissible means more people will get infected. And if more people get infected, then of course more will get the sickness and more will die. So these are some of the reasons. It is also possible that part of the reason why we're getting that, because we're dealing with a new variant, it means that even those who may have, if, for example, if, like we said, the vaccine or the previous immunity does not protect you, it means even those who recover from the first one may also get infected with the new variant. And like I mentioned the fact that the flu vaccine is prepared almost like every 2 years, because those who have it last time, the immunity must have waned, and you can get, if a new virus comes up, you still get infected, even though you have been vaccinated before. But I don't think we have the same situation. We don't know yet. Let me say, we don't know yet whether we're going to get the same situation with coronavirus. But I think the world is getting prepared with the experience of the flu and others. I'm sure action is being taken in different parts of the world to catch up and meet it and catch it up even before it becomes a danger to the people.
Well, there are so many other things that that are not fully known about this virus. At the start of it, it was thought that Africa, Nigeria, for example, would be so hard hit that people would be dropping off dead on the streets. That hasn't happened, mercifully. But you think that two things here. It's still inexplicable why it doesn't seem as virulent as what we see from Europe and America. And as a result of that, would you say this has led to some complacency among the population?
Again, Cyril, you are very right in what you have just said. But let me start from the beginning. At the time, people were saying many people are going to start dropping dead in Africa. A lot of people were talking out of ignorance. This was a new disease in which we knew very little about, in which each of us was learning as it evolved. This evasive virus was evolving. You remember at the beginning, the symptoms were usually associated with something like malaria-like respiratory infection, and then gradually other things started coming in, like people losing their sense of taste, their sense of smell, and those other things. These were things that developed over the period. At the time when it was assumed that when it comes to Africa, it's going to create a major problem, we're living on history of the experience of epidemics in Africa, in which normally, think of Ebola, think of Lassa fever, think of all those things. Anytime those epidemics come to Africa, they cause devastation. So, of course, living on history, we said if anything new comes, the same situation was going to come to Africa. Unfortunately, the situation in Africa proved them wrong. As you use the word, mercifully proved them wrong. But one of the things I think that came out of this was that I sat down at a meeting in which one of our ministers said, oh, they said he was going to kill everybody in Africa. He's killing them in Europe. He's not killing us. He said it must be what our government has done. And I got up to say, Honorable Minister, sir, that is not right. You're correct. He's killing people in Europe. He's not killing in Africa. But your deduction, that is what our government has done, is what is causing it. It's not right. And the thing is that it is more what the virus did not do. But we have explanations for those ones. Let me start from this. In most of the people who are dying in Europe are the elderly people. A lot of people 50 years and above who have what they call comorbidities, other situations, diabetes, hypertension, another kind of thing, cancer, all those things. Now, the population in the African region, we have more, if you look at the pyramid of population, the African pyramid is actually more like a pyramid. You have the base, which was broader, containing younger people. And then as you go to the top, you find that the older people are fewer. While in Europe and some other places, it is a reverse pyramid in which more of the older people are at the top and then the younger people are at the bottom. So if the disease affects the older people, of course, that means more of the people in Europe will be affected and will die. But interestingly, if you look at the situation in Nigeria, for example, we are having more of the cases occurring in people from the age of 25 to about 50. They are the ones that are getting infected. But the people that are dying are more of those above 50. So we are having a situation where a large majority of our young people are not showing the symptoms. But that is even more dangerous because they don't know they have it and they are spreading it. And these are the complacency that we have. And just like you said, people then say, oh, they said we're all going to start dying and picking dead bodies. But it's not point. Don't mind them. They've done that. And that led us into a kind of complacency. Even when the government told us to start using the non-pharmaceutical interventions, we discarded all those stories. The numbers were not there, so we're not seeing anybody who's dying. But in fact, people are dying. And when you talk about all we're getting was the lab result. When we say 100,000 people positive, it's only those you tested. If you didn't test, you won't know who has. And so, you remember our testing was not particularly of any high standard at that time. Therefore, we're picking only the tip of the iceberg of those who had infection. Though many of them may not be showing the symptoms, but it does not mean they're not infected. And because they're infected, it means they can transmit it to other people who may be more vulnerable. So that's the situation. There's also the speculation that because of our weather, viruses are innocuous protein material. And under the condition we're living with the outside environment, the likelihood that those viruses will not survive for a long time. Imagine if the virus was in a cold situation during the winter in Europe and it lands on the surface. It's likely to survive for a longer time than the one that is directly out in the sun in Africa. But also, let me clarify that. The situation you find in offices where you have air conditioning, where an enclosed place, and 3, 4, 5 people are there holding meetings, and the air conditioning is circulating, that creates almost something similar to what happened in Europe. And that's why you find more of the people who are inside offices and air-conditioned places beginning to spread the disease among themselves. We have examples, like happened in UCH and a few other places. When somebody comes in and they're holding this meeting, 3-4 day meeting, and by the time the meeting is finished, virtually everybody who was in that meeting got infected. They may not fall sick, but they are tested positive. I think those are the two things we can compare. So compare that office with the air conditioning. Compare it to the open market in Africa, the Abuja market or wherever, where the sun is shining, the air is blowing. Any virus in that place, the chances of its survival are not. I mean, it's very, very limited. Secondly, there's the speculation that perhaps there have been a related virus that have been circulating in the African region, which gave us some kind of immunity.
Right.
And studies are being done right now, and we should be able to provide answers soon, where we are looking at what we call archival sera. That is serum that have been collected from people over before COVID came into Nigeria. That is serum collected like 2018, 2017, 2019. And we're looking at those sera and see whether there's antibodies to either coronavirus or a related coronavirus, which could be providing the partial protection we're getting. So these are speculations that are coming on that could be responsible for what we are getting. But unfortunately, as you said, it has led us to a little bit of complacency. And I think we are paying for it right now.
Now that you speak of what you call archival serum, let me bring this out. I know it was at the start of the pandemic in many parts of the world. Not much was known then at the start of it. And there was the talk of what was referred to as herd immunity, with even some world leaders suggesting that it could be one of the measures. Herd immunity could lead to getting rid of the pandemic faster. Now, no, we don't hear much about herd immunity now, but take us through. How does herd immunity work?
Okay. What would they mean by herd immunity is the fact that, let me take a good example of polio vaccination, or let's say yellow fever vaccination. We get occasional epidemics of yellow fever in different parts of or maybe in Africa, let me put that on, where we get it in Nigeria and other places. Soon after an epidemic has occurred, a lot of people will be infected and they will develop immunity. So assuming in a room where there are 10 of us and there are 8 of us have been infected, we cannot provide what you call the herd immunity for the remaining 2 that are not infected and are not protected. So let's assume that a mosquito that is carrying yellow fever virus comes into that kind of room where 8 of us are already protected and 2 are not. The chances of the mosquito biting those 2 is slimmer than biting the remaining 8 of us. So in a way, the 8 of us have provided a herd immunity for the 2. That's what happens. However, herd immunity is not a constant thing. The more people you have coming in, young people being brought into the condition, they dilute that herd immunity. And so if we had an outbreak of yellow fever, say 20 years ago, and we have not had anyone since then, it means all these past 20 years, there will be people who are not exposed to that epidemic in 20 years, who are now not protected and diluting the herd immunity that we had for those of us who had it in 20 years ago. So as time goes on, as more people get in, your herd immunity becomes almost to 0. And that's why vaccination becomes important.
All right, Prof. Just before we go into the other issues about vaccination, you did extensive work on Ebola. Now, Ebola came to this country and it was deadly. People were told to observe certain protocols, and you could see that there was stricter observance of those protocols. Perhaps it was because you could easily see someone who was afflicted with Ebola, the bleeding from all openings, the collapse, a sudden illness, and it was quite visible. With corona, as we have all agreed, there are people who do not show symptoms, asymptomatic people, so it's not easy to know if 10 people within a particular place are carrying the coronavirus. So, do you think that Nigerians, the populace, were able to respond faster, that the people observed the protocols then strictly because they could see how deadly Ebola was? And now that at some point in time, it would seem COVID is a long way off, and they're not seeing people bleeding from, all the openings. You think that's part of the reason why people are slow to adopt the non-pharmaceutical measures that have been recommended?
You know, as we were talking, my mind was going to the two viruses. You know, the coronavirus is a smarter virus than Ebola virus. Let me explain that. When Ebola came and became such devastation, obvious things that you can see, people bleeding, it commanded more respect from our people. And therefore, just the mere mention of Ebola means even everybody, in fact, the government, every day, you remember that time, immediately our government set up committees, they released funds almost immediately, and you didn't have to be told, to take care of me, to protect yourself, because that virus was so devastating and commanded the fear, let me not call it the respect, the fear of all of us. Unlike this young coronavirus, which came in mildly. But again, I use the word, it's a more smarter virus because it's affecting more people. And we relax about it. And that's the same reason, yes, we were able to focus on Ebola because of the devastation it was causing. And because of that one, everybody's got so got scared about it that even without being told, you follow the rules and regulations. But here, like you said, how many people are you seeing really in the population that has coming down? This is a very mild disease. It's typical to like malaria. It's like common cough. So we mix a lot of things with it, and therefore, in a way, kind of lost fear for it, and therefore, with that, not only our fear but also our respect for it, and that's why I think a lot of people were not as serious in following the interventions as we did with Ebola. But my fear, my prayer is that we don't have anything like Ebola. But at the same time, does not mean that we should not follow, because people are dying, even with the coronavirus. It may not be like that in Nigeria, but I'm sure you've said it already. Go outside the country and outside of Africa, you see a much devastation. And they have good respect for it there. That more than we are having here.
Well, again, the other part of the issue here is this. As you have said to us, and as we all know now, those with comorbidities, who have other ailments, underlying illnesses, they are more susceptible to serious repercussions from the COVID-19. But again, when such people, unfortunately, do not make it, and the numbers are given that 10 have died of coronavirus, and you say of the 10, perhaps 8 of them had diabetes, heart disease. And so people ask, at what point do you say COVID was responsible for a death? Or those other comorbidities that you have? So it tends to create some confusion here.
One important thing I think we need to stress. Each of us, every one of us is susceptible to that infection. It is the outcome that we're talking about that leads to death. Whether I have comorbidity or you don't have comorbidity, once I'm out in the environment where you are, each of us are equally susceptible to getting infected. Now the outcome is what we're talking about. If I already have an underlying problem, then my outcome may be worse than that of the person who doesn't have an underlying problem. And now, what people don't come out is that you look at the immediate cause of death, and that's why this is assigned to COVID. It's somebody who has the diabetes and dies of road accident. They will not say he died of diabetes, but he died of road traffic accident.
Right.
Because that is the immediate cause of death. And so that's the reason why when people have that thing and they're sick and they're proven to be COVID, now of course the immediate cause of that death is COVID, although the underlying situation will worsen the situation and make the death come in more rapidly or the disease to progress to the fatal end. So that's what happens. And that's what we're talking about when we say somebody died of COVID, whether comorbidity or not, we say that is the immediate cause of the death. And that's why COVID got in the COVID deaths we're getting.
All right, Prof, let's bring it down to this level now. Avoiding this virus. And the people have been told, and one of the best ways is non-pharmaceutical way, wearing of mask, hands hygiene, use of washing of hands regularly, and the use of hand sanitizers. But it would seem that a large number of the population still do not take this seriously. How important is this non-pharmaceutical intervention?
Thank you, Cyril. I think the only way to show this is to look at countries that controlled the disease, the outbreak. Countries like New Zealand, countries like Taiwan, a few other countries like that, where they went in from day one to enforce these non-pharmaceutical interventions. Those were countries that were able confidently not to lock down. In fact, New Zealand never locked down. Taiwan never locked down. But the only way they did was to ensure that everybody complied. And when we mean everybody complied, it was everybody got involved. It was not just a government thing trying to enforce it. People participated. They took it as their responsibility. And when it happened in such way, and of course you will have one or two people who will not follow such things. But immediately, the power of the law was put on such people. I remember watching a movie, one of the videotapes, in which early in the stages of Wuhan, there was a picture of a woman who was in the crowd and without her mask. The big loudspeaker called her the woman in red. You are not wearing your mask, and immediately she ran back home. Those are the kind of things that they did in those places. And if they caught you do anything, you were fined immediately. And those are the things. So the enforcement was there, but people did not wait for enforcement. They carried it as a personal responsibility. And I think that's one of the areas I think we made a little mistake when we started. The impression about epidemics in our region is that it is government that is controlling epidemic. That has been a wrong impression that people have had. It is not government that controls epidemic. It is people. And let me give you a bit. We talk about mobile phone. Your phone is only mobile when you carry it around. If you drop it on your table, it remains there immobile. So also with COVID, we are the ones that make COVID mobile. And on that message should have gotten into our people that this virus can only move through you and by you and with you doing all those things. If that emphasis had been laid, then that you are the more important person in this COVID control, not the government, but me as an individual, perhaps that message should have come out much, much earlier, rather than now that we're bringing a law to enforce it. And normally in Nigeria, laws, they don't really, enforcement of law is quite a bit of a problem. So I think from the beginning, emphasis should have been laid on the fact that this is not PTF controlling the epidemic. It is me and you and every individual. And that you are important. You are, in fact, I use the word, the most important person in the control of the epidemic is that individual, is that ordinary Nigerian citizen. That message should have been there from day one.
Yeah, Prof, I brought this up because some people would argue and say one of the biggest challenges we have here is the people's way of life. People love partying. People love religious gatherings. And once anything says avoid these gatherings, then they feel as if they are being caged. The president has signed a presidential order, and now some people are already beginning to say, oh, why do you want to jail people who refuse to wear their face masks? Oh, there are more serious things. How do you respond to that?
Let me ask the same question. When Ebola was here, did we go to parties? These are the questions that we're asking. When people don't take their life, they don't add value to their life and consider their life important enough, then they think other things can take the place. But then they forget that it is not only their life they're endangering, but they're also other people's life. That's the responsibility we're talking about. Of course, I mean, people will do what they wish to do based on their perception of what this is. When we already said they can't see people dying, I mean, we started the wrong impression that people are going to start dying on the road. then they didn't die. Nobody was picking up dead bodies. So of course that led to the first reaction. So when government came and started talking about, put your face masks and all that kind of thing, they still didn't believe that because they cannot see. But it's not everything you see. I mean, everything that is happening that you see. And that's the problem we have over this issue. A disease that is so severe, nobody will tell you not to go anywhere. But unfortunately, like I said, this was a virus that come in mildly, smarter though I think it is, because it then gets a chance to infect more people. But then that means people have lost respect for it. And even no matter what you say, no matter what number NCDC puts out there, people are very skeptical. They say, oh no, we don't do this. Let me give you one good example of what happened. You remember during the time when our numbers were going down, I think it was during the Salah period, the Salah holidays. 2-3 weeks before the Salah holidays, Nigeria was testing about 11,000 samples per week. During the Salah week, we tested maybe about 3,000 or so. Of course, because you tested less, the numbers started going down. The interpretation by the people of Nigeria was that COVID was going. But it took PTF almost a week to announce to the people that the reason why we're getting those drop in numbers was because we're not testing more. They were not testing during the Salah holidays. But by then it was too late. The people have made up their mind that the thing was gone. So government now coming back to say we're not testing, that's the reason why the number is low. Nobody believed the government. One message from that is that immediate information, any delay in passing information can cause trouble. And any information you give the complete information. Leave no gaps. The gaps will be filled by fake news and override all your good points you have raised. Government should give complete information, good or bad. I was on a TV in a program where we're talking about palliatives. They showed a clip of people in one part of Nigeria all jumping up, dancing, government has given us palliative and all that kind of thing. And then you were asking, what do I say about what the government is doing? I said, but you're only showing one side of the story. There are also, at the same time, there are parts of this country where the palliative has not reached. You have not said anything about that. So that's not the balanced information. So government must give the balanced information. This is what we're doing. When they are not able to do something, say it. We are all human beings. People fail. And there are also circumstances that will make us fail. But tell the truth to the people. We succeeded here. We did not succeed here because of this. This is the reason. And tell that information as quickly as possible. Don't wait for a week before when people start speculating. Then it is medicine after death. This is what we call madness. Mad, M-A-D, is medicine after death. You have become mad then at that time because what you are doing does not help the people anymore.
All right. Now, Prof, let's come to the now issue, which is that of the vaccine. And, well, coronavirus from day one has been enmeshed in all kinds of theories, conspiracy theories. And those theories are mounting by the day, even as vaccines are set to come into this country. But it's not peculiar to Nigeria. All over the world, there are still stories of conspiracy theories, and one popular one is that the vaccine is meant to reduce the world's population. Back in these parts, the question is, the West wants to continue to impoverish Africa, and therefore the vaccines would deplete Africa's population, kill off its productive population, and things like that. How do you respond?
You see, when stories like that come out, I want people to think back and ask certain things. Who is giving that information? What is his background? What knowledge does he have? For example, if a carpenter comes to me and says he wants to help me repair my car, you think I will listen to him? When a chiropractor or somebody who is in one thing start talking about immunology and vaccine, you want to query that kind of person when he's not an expert in that area. That's number one. And then you look back in the past. If this was the first vaccine in the world, then we can say that. How many vaccines have we got in different parts of the world today? You can name them. Hundreds and tens of vaccines. Yellow fever, measles, pertussis. penta vaccine, polio. They have been used all over the place. How many of them have decimated our population? Rather than anything, it has improved the life and the health of the people. So why should the one for COVID be the one that will now come and kill us? They have all the opportunities if they want to do that. Even every drug we use in our different countries, where did they come from? Most of it comes from outside. If they had wanted to kill us, they would have finished us a long time ago. They don't need to wait for COVID to do that. So a lot of the stories that are coming in, I think we need to sit down and examine those places. Take the example of the way they said, oh, it's something about 5G and all that kind of thing. And which 5G? Do you have 5G in my mother's village? Do you have 5G in some other towns? And the people not dying? These are questions that people should reason, not just take stories that they said. Examine the story. Find out who said it. What is their motive behind it? And then determine for yourself whether those things are true. And then over a period of time, a lot of these theories have come. Nobody repeats them anymore because they know it's of no use. Unfortunately, damage has been done. We have some of our religious people taking all those stories and bringing it, adding religious connotations to it. These are people who are taking advantage of them for their own purpose, not for the good of the people. So rumors will come. I mean, it's not the first time. For every vaccine that comes in, there have been rumors, there have been all sorts of stories. But many of them have been proven not to be so.
All right, still speaking on the vaccines, and when they do come in here, the vaccines have been said will provide some form of protection, but it's not 100%, is it?
It's not.
Okay.
You're right, it's not.
Okay.
It is only one of the additional ammunitions we're using. There's so many things. I mean, when you have a problem, they give you one drug, they give you another drug, they give you another. So all that combined to make it. So vaccine is one of the additional things in addition to the non-pharmaceutical interventions. And let me say two things about vaccines. Vaccines is like the dead end of a spectrum of an infection. You are exposed to an infection or a pathogen. It causes infection in your body. And the infection can progress to either you recover without any problem, or it progresses to disease. Most likely, if you have a problem and all those things, it's likely to progress to disease. What vaccines does is that when you get it, it stimulates your body to create what we call antibodies. And so that even though you have been vaccinated, you don't develop immunity the day you get vaccinated. It takes some time, which means that during that period, before your body develops immunity, you are still vulnerable to infection. And the fact that you are protected, I mean, the fact that you have gotten the vaccine, have immunity, does not mean that you are protected from exposure. Exposure means I go out, I'm not wearing my mask, somebody who had the disease has it, and it spreads it to me. The immunity in my body will not stop that exposure. Right. Nor will it stop me developing infection around the area where I get infected. But the immunity will stop that infection from progressing to disease. That is what, so that's why it is only one of the other ammunitions that we need to make use of, combined to. So pharmaceutical intervention, what do you call it? The vaccination, all combined together to ensure that it gives you additional assurance that if you get the infection, you will not fall sick or die from it.
All right, Prof, I brought this up because there's a tendency of some people to say, look, once you get the vaccination, well, that's my license to do away. So what we're trying to say here now is we're not likely to do away with the non-pharmaceutical interventions overnight. They are still going to be there. And this is what needs to be underlined at every opportunity.
You are very correct. And I think I will also join you in stating it. Until we reach a level where we have we talked about herd immunity a long time ago. Until we reach a level where the herd immunity is as high, 70%, 80%, or even 90% above. Until we reach that level, we must continue to put that in. Remember I said your vaccination does not prevent you from getting exposed. Nor does it prevent you from getting infected, but it prevents you from prevent infection getting to disease. And I've used that example of the yellow fever vaccine. The fact that 80 out of 10 of us here, 80% of us have gotten the immunity. In a way, we may protect the two that don't have. But the more people that don't have, the more we dilute that immunity, and that herd immunity becomes nothing. And that's why you still prevent yourself from getting this. It's like malaria. I mean, you don't, the fact that you've been treated for malaria doesn't mean that you expose yourself to mosquitoes and open your door, the mosquitoes come in. So that prevention of mosquito is a non-pharmaceutical intervention. If we are doing it for malaria and we're doing it for yellow fever, why are we saying we can't do it for COVID?
Well, Prof, if COVID-19 has brought anything out, it's awareness about immune systems and how the body's immunity works. Now you hear more people talking about immunity, even though there's still areas where people do not really get it. Immunity, is it just what you get from drugs, or what you start all along from your diets, the way you live your life and all that?
Yeah, I mean, in broad sense, that's the word. The vaccine immunity is a specific immunity. Immunity comes, the whole body system. I mean, between life and death, it's a battle between what is internal and what is external. If the virus comes in and your body's immunity, your body's protective mechanism are not at par, you will succumb to the disease. And what are the factors? The nutrition improves the protein that the body uses to develop the antibodies comes from proteins. It comes from the good food you eat. It comes from all the other aspects of this thing. The way you even treat your body, exercising your body, making sure that the body is at par, working very well. All those are factors which make that body, again, quote in a bracket, the immunity against external aggression that comes in. So it is, we shouldn't look at vaccine as the end it all, but there are other aspects. Live a good life, eat good food. And by good food, I'm not talking about going to a restaurant or something. Nature has provided basic food for us to make use of that will improve our nutrition. And I remember in those days when we were growing up, fruits were all over the place. You ate the banana, you ate the plantain, you took all these things. And in a way, we were managing. And those were days when there were no vaccines at all. And of course, a lot of people died, but a lot of us also survived based on nutrition rather than on vaccination, which we never had. So all work together to make sure that this body we call our body is protected, has ability within itself to withstand any aggression from outside, pathogenic or otherwise.
Now let's come to one of the things you're passionate about. Research is going on. A vaccine is out. People are still trying to find a cure for this pandemic. I mean, this disease, and all suggestions have been flying around about what to do. This has also brought up the matter of developing local resources, especially at times like this. And let's ask you, Prof, how far with indigenous efforts providing some, eventual cure for a disease like COVID? What can
Thank you
we
very
do?
much. You raised a most important point. We are where we are today because I think we have neglected that the environment to make our researchers perform excellently well, as some of them are doing in the diaspora. At one of the meetings we had with the Governors Forum, one of the governors asked me, there are so many researchers in this country, PhDs, professors, all of us, what's happening? And then, my answer to him was that the problem is not the professor. The problem is the environment in which the professor finds himself. The same professor who is here today can't do nothing because of poor electricity, poor that, poor this one, goes out of the country and goes to an environment where the environment is not toxic and makes headline news. So, and then I gave them example of my generation, which I said, look, for me, there was good governance made the difference in our own time. And let me give you I'll tell you a bit of my story. My father had, I don't know, I think the number of wives I remember was about 13 of them. And to show you the real difference between in the family, the first 3 or 4 children of my father were older than my mother. And I dare not call them brother or sister because they were older than my mother. There were so many, the chances of any of us getting to school was gone. There was no way. We were all meant for the farm, especially the wanted boys, so that they can go to work in the farm. Then the government of that day introduced what we call free and compulsory primary school education. And that pushed all of us to the primary school. By the grace of God, many of us who were able to move from there to secondary school with scholarship. We moved from secondary school to university with scholarship. We never left this country. I went from one local village to another local place and then ended up in Zaria, where I did my university education. The environment made it possible for me to be what I am. By the grace of God, I can hold my head anywhere in the world. All my training was done in this country. That is the environment we're talking about. The same generation, now, because of the toxic environment, I suddenly become retired professor of this, retired professor of that, and I'm not able to do anything. Not because my brain has died, but because the environment for me to use that thing is not there. Our country has abandoned research, we have abandoned technology over the years, and we're now complaining and just waiting to consume other people's technology. So we need to get back to basics. What was the environment then that made people like me to excel? I'm not being proud, but I'm just saying the passion I have for my country. And that's why I keep telling people that no matter what anybody says, I can never pay back to this country what I owe the country because of what those things they did during my growing up years. Irrespective of, I know we have a flawed country now, but I still must remember that without this country, I won't be where I am. That's the same thing I want for the generation that is here now. I want that generation, which incidentally are much smarter and wiser than us. If we can give them that 1/10 of the environment that I had, you will see how this country become the diaspora for everybody. So, Cyril, it is not the professor, it is not the human resource, it is the environment in which you have put them, which has become toxic. Let me give you one more story. In 1989, yeah, 1989, that was the time. 2 students from the US came to study with us in Ibadan. And we took them around this country on how to deal with Lassa. This is how we do Lassa. This is how we treat people. This is how we collect samples. 2019, 30 years later, Nigeria had the 50 years of Lassa fever and invited experts from all over the world to come and tell us how to deal with Lassa. Of those experts, 2 of them, one of them was the student that came to learn from me in 1989, who now comes back to Nigeria 30 years later to teach me how to deal with Lassa. Are you seeing the point I'm saying?
Well, Prof, as we said earlier on, the race to find the cure is on. But this again brings science and technology into focus. Till date, the common cold is yet to be dealt with completely. And the world is facing a pandemic, and this is not the first. Has science slowed down, or is it that the hurdles that science must face now are much more than what science faced before?
You know, very, very interesting question, and I'll tell you why. People have said, oh, HIV has been there, no vaccine. This has been there, no vaccine. That has been there, no vaccine. Suddenly, COVID. We have to think on why would it be? We must begin to find out the reason. COVID has crippled global economy. There's no other disease that has done that, in which virtually every country in the world has one thing or the other. This is a disease that has touched every aspect of human life all over the countries of the world. So it has become a global emergency. And therefore, the speed with which people looked at COVID virus is not the same thing that you take with Lassa virus, for example, whose economy, who may be affecting the economy in Nigeria, but only seasonally. All common cold is something you get and you go back to work. Or a few of the other things. Has any of them compared in terms of effect on the global economy, which affects everybody's life? And that's why we have to urgently find something for it. The more severe a pathogen is in causing disruption of life, the more we react to it. If a fire is burning in somebody's house, you want to quench that fire as compared to when a broken window is there. You can leave that window for some time. That's the same thing, analogy we have to look at with COVID. COVID is a fire burning the entire world, and we need to quench it as quickly as possible. That's what happened. It is not that people have neglected, it's just that the relevance in terms of the intensity of what those other things are causing, either to my basic life, and that's why they've been relegated to the background. Science has moved. And in fact, let me give one good example about science. I used to say one thing about everything about is moving. In the days when they were taking people to slaves in America, how long did it take them to go by ships? Maybe 6 months, 3 months, 1 month. When in the colonial areas, when people like Azikiwe and Awolowo were going overseas by MV Oriol, they would take them 2 weeks. Today, when my president wants to go to UK, he does it in 5 hours. Am I going to say, because the plane is so fast, I'm not going to enter the plane, I will go by the MV Oriol? No. Things are improving. And each time things are being done, issues of safety and security become important. And therefore, all the advancement in other areas have been responsible for maybe the fast way in which this virus was created. But don't forget, when Ebola became a major issue, the vaccine was found in less than 2 years. But then for the COVID, what have been learned, and this is where the foundation of science becomes important. What we are getting with COVID now is like what you call a play and plug type of thing. Like in your house, if you have 4 or 5 different sockets, you can take your computer and plug it to one socket. You can take your fan and plug it in another pocket. You can take your television and plug it in another pocket. That's what has happened. Science has laid the framework and the foundation on which you can pick viruses now or vaccines now and plug into that foundation that is there. And that's why it's much faster than what it used to be. In fact, the technique that have been done has actually been in operation for the last 4 or 5 years. And they've used it for a few other viruses which are not of global economy. I mean, no major impact on global economy. So it was just building on those building blocks that made making the vaccine fast. But the issue of the safety, the efficacy, all those type of things have not been compromised. So science has continued to do, but it only becomes economy decides what you use with your science. When science can make impact on the economy, of course, people look into it. People talk about internet now. When did the internet start? Started way in the 50s, when the US government through the army put money into the development of internet. Now everybody is talking about internet. Nobody remembers that it took that long of time to lay the foundation for the internet. So that's what is science. Science is there, and it becomes useful when, it become applicable when there's a major reason for it. And that's what has happened with COVID, as compared to Lassa or to other virus diseases.
Professor Tomori, as we begin to wind down, there's something I always do on a program like this, and I say, well, no matter the advances in science, no matter the development of antidotes and cures, the old saying that prevention is always better than cure can still hold here. And so, as Nigerians grapple with this pandemic, what's your last word about everything that's been said, conspiracy theories and all that? What should the people do?
Thank you very much. I mean, that is the crux of the matter. All our discussion is prevent yourself from getting infected. And the steps to prevent that are there. Avoid large gatherings of places where people are coming and all those things. We know how the disease is spread. wear your mask, because the man that is coming to you who is not wearing a mask, you don't know whether he's positive until he's tested. So assume he's positive, especially if he's not wearing his mask. So keep your distance from such a person. It could be a danger to your life. Wear your mask for such people, because until you test him, you don't know whether he has it. And don't assume that because he's my friend, he's my brother, he's my this. No. Put on, this morning, I was at the post office in Ibadan, and I got in there, 4, 5, 6, everybody on the counter. Nobody was wearing masks. And I told the man there, I said, I'm not going to, unless you wear your mask, I'm not going to transact what I came to do. I would rather go home. Oh, he said, this thing, the mask is in my pocket. So I then said, is your nose in your pocket? Or is your mouth in your pocket? He said, put this in your mouth and your nose, not in your pocket. So each of us have a role to play. If you go out and meet anybody, respectfully ask them, please, put in, this is the reason for it. A few days ago, I was also before this major thing last year, I was in a hotel in Abuja. The receptionist, nobody was wearing mask. And I said, I'm not entering your hotel and I'm not registering. I'll go and look for another hotel if you don't wear your mask. Typically, the mask was under the table on the place there. So we need to, for our own sake, for their own sake, tell people prevention is better than cure, because you don't know what is going to happen to you. You cannot assume that if you get the infection, you will recover.
All right.
You may end up dying.
Okay.
And if you're the breadwinner for your house, then you begin to see how important you are.
Okay. All right. Professor Oyewale Tomori, it's been interesting talking to you. We'd like to thank you for coming on this program. Thank you so very much. And we hope to come to you again and find out just how well we're doing with research and a possible cure for COVID-19. Thank you, Professor Tomori, for coming on One-on-One.
Thank you, Cyril. It's a pleasure to be on One-on-One. You are a consummate professional. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I am Cyril Stober, and I say continue to stay safe.